My name is Dan, and I am weird. But I don't see weird as a bad thing, though. Being weird just means you march to the beat of a different drum. You don't fit that mold that society wants to shove you into. I'm out searching for people like me. The weirder, the better. This is my story. These are their stories. This is the power of weird. This episode of The Power of Weird is brought to you by The Spectrum Perspective, communication training for the modern business. Learn more online at thespectrumperspective.com or simply follow the link in the description below. Hello everybody, and welcome to The Power of Weird. My name is Dan and I'm your host. A little bit about me. I'm 37 years old, I'm 6 foot 7 inches tall. In my adult life, I've weighed as little as 295 pounds and as much as 640 pounds. I'm sometimes too smart for my own good, but at times in personal relationships, I'm also pretty clueless. I've been a vegetarian since 2001, and I also don't drink coffee. I'm a sought-after brand designer and leadership coach and the co-founder of a lightsaber combat program. I'm also a dad to a great 17-year-old kid and a proud uncle to 3 nephews, 21, 18, and 9, and 3 nieces, 15, 14, and 12. What's probably more interesting about me, though, is I'm an autistic entrepreneur and business professional. A book that I read in my early 20s changed my life forever. It was called The Secret of the Shadow by an author named Debbie Ford. In this book, Debbie talks about the things that we sometimes are embarrassed about ourselves, bringing them into the light and making them work for you. Creating your own special recipe with the ingredients only you have to make a difference in your life and in the world. At this point in my life, I already knew I was weird, but I didn't know about my diagnosis. I've tried to accomplish the mission she set out for me in this book every day since. I'll leave a link to the book in the description below. Part of that mission was to make this podcast, finding other people who are weird or different or who don't fit in and who are living their best lives because of it. Through interviewing them and telling their stories, I hope to learn more about myself and that everyone listening does the same. Today we're going to hear my conversation with Jennifer Martin, a brilliant marketer and accomplished entrepreneur. She currently serves as the sales and marketing director for a great media company called Vid Monster Productions in Bowling Green, Kentucky. Jennifer's contact information can be found in the description below. Hey there, everybody. I'm here with a friend of mine today who has definitely been an inspiration in my professional career, and also just a good person to talk to and a very good person to have around on the Rolodex, so to speak, if any of you guys are old enough to know what that is. This is my friend Jennifer Martin. Jennifer, how are you?
Dan, I'm well. How are you?
I am doing pretty well. This has been an interesting road with this podcasting thing so far, but I'm getting to talk to lots of great people, so it's definitely a plus.
Well, I appreciate you asking me to be on.
Well, yeah, for sure. So the concept of the podcast, like I said, I know you haven't gotten a chance to catch up on all of our back episodes yet. It's called The Power of Weird, and it's all about people who kind of do their own thing and don't march to the beat of the drum of, that society plays, and don't get pigeonholed into what people expect out of you. And the first time I met you was actually when you had created a very cool series of like B2B, that's business to business for folks that don't know, B2B like marketing events. It was just outstanding. And I was, I mean, to say I was impressed is, is an understatement. But, can you tell us a little bit about that? I know that was a big formative thing for you and just kind of how you came to that, how it really all came together. And, what made you even decide to be like, hey, time to do an event for everybody in the world to see and make things happen?
Yeah, so it's a fun story with a fun name. It was called Chocolate Blues Business Networking Expo, but Chocolate Blues for short, for those who were familiar. I actually didn't create the company. A lady named Shelly Rice created the company, and she had done events. And when she was ready to retire, at that time, I was her area director for Kentucky and Tennessee, managing events in both states. And she said, Jennifer, you do this better than I do it. And I'm ready to retire. Can you please take this over? And so, we had a little bit of a longer discussion. It was a little bit more detailed, but ultimately, I bought the business from her and started launching the events. And we further into areas geographically that we hadn't been in yet, and also continuing to do the historical events that we had in other areas. We ran across 11 states. We did over 100 events per year. I had 23 area directors. We also had some admin and graphic and support staff to kind of help us with some things. And that was around the 2010, 2011, 2012, 2014, 15, that time frame. I did sell that business, probably, oh man, how long has it been? Maybe about 5 years, 6 years ago. I can't remember. About 5 or so years ago. And so
Okay.
a lot of maybe six, a lot of life has changed since then. But with the events, I mean, they were so much fun. It was exclusively, like you mentioned, focused on B2B, business to business, and would go into an area and just blitz it in about 3 months and just be super obnoxious in either the best or the worst ways, whichever one you felt like looking at that day, and just get to know everybody and make sure that everyone knew that they were invited if they owned a business, if they were affected by the sales in a business, if they needed to connect and network, this was the place. And so we would have either large ballrooms or just various venue type locations that could seat, not really seat, actually, nobody really sat. Everybody was walking around talking.
Right.
But we could fit about, 2 to 3 thousand people in this room. It was pretty amazing. And the energy was explosive. And certain cities were more popular than others,
Sure.
and as it will, different metropolitan areas. But ultimately, what it was a conduit for others to be able to receive bigger things, and that's
Mhm.
really where my heart was in it. Was to be able to find a way to work with small businesses on a large scale without having to be so exact, as well as help them connect them to the resources that they need. I didn't have to be an expert in everything.
Sure.
So sometimes I think we all get caught up in worrying about learning, I have to know everything before I can do this. And that's really not the
Right.
case. Just starting somewhere, sometimes helping someone with an introduction is a huge part of being able to contribute to a process. So that was really what we did. And we would have different vendors and sponsors come together
Hmm.
and rent table space and so on. And they could connect with the other attendees. And I know you were there. You
I
were a
was.
hater. You were phenomenal. You had an excellent booth,
It was
all
interesting.
kinds of goodies. It was so much fun. There were
Well,
so many
we had
resources
a
there,
4 foot a 4 foot diameter what would you
like
call it?
large
Like a
wheel. It
wheel.
was like
Yeah,
a
the big
spin
spin the
wheel.
wheel type of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was
yeah.
fun.
That was anything that invokes um interaction and
Hmm.
creativity and play, and people love that. And so that's doesn't matter how old you get, you still want to be interactive and have
Fair
fun with
enough.
it.
Well,
So
one thing that you touch on is, you got in there and really did make an effort to really get to know everybody and kind of be central social figure for all this kind of stuff. And I can speak from my own experience. Most marketers that I meet anyway, and you may have a different experience, most marketers are really good at telling people stories, but they're not necessarily good at like maintaining relationships and building relationships.
mhm.
I don't know what it is about us that we're weird like that, but that's something I've always been really impressed with you is you build and maintain these relationships with people where I've tried to be much the same way where somebody comes to me and it's something I can't do. I say, oh, well, I've got a guy or I've got a girl for that.
Yep.
I've always been so impressed by that. I mean, you have this ability to really forge these relationships and sincerity. I've been at events before, like the ones that you had, where it's very obvious that people are there just because they have to be, and it's like, oh God, here comes that guy again, or whatever. And I don't know if you're just really good at hiding it, or if you, but it always seemed very sincere. Is there a trick to that? Is there a secret to that? Is that something that people can learn how to do, or is it just you do it or you don't, and sucks to be you if you don't?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, we're all human. And so we can't be on 100% of the time.
Sure.
But being able to train yourself to code switch, if you
Hmm.
will, and create the right mindset for the moment, check it at the door. And you maybe have heard that phrase. I think that's really where many of us have an opportunity to kind of change our day, change someone else's day, change your life in some aspects too. And for me, it was really always down to how would I want to be treated?
Sure.
And if I had this need, what would I want? And so, at the
Hmm.
very least, sometimes being able to have someone who is willing to help or find a connection or answer a question or
Hmm.
remember something important, the least we could do for each other, especially when you're involved with a small business, is to share a referral. Um, if you can't do nothing else, if you can't,
Right.
buy the service, pay the fee, do the thing, contribute the time, whatever, the very least you can do is give a referral. And so I like to, I'm a planner with different things, especially in many parts of my life, but
I
it
never
was
would have
very,
guessed.
it was very apparent during that time with Chocolate Blues that I like to plan. And so I found a lot of solace in the process.
Mhm.
So my soul was very fed during that. So automatically I was happy.
Sure.
But and just being able to help other people.
Hmm.
My father was a small business owner, and so growing up and kind of witnessing how it could be feast or famine sometimes,
Oh, yes.
and one referral can change the game for
Hmm.
someone. And seeing many of my friends are small business owners, and over many parts of my life I've been interactive with that. And it's not that I'm anti big business, but
Sure.
sometimes it's we have to focus on
Hmm.
giving back and putting our dollars back in or our effort
Right.
back in with the small businesses, and we can't forget it. But being able to just bring our best skill sets to the table for our friends, for our neighbors, for
Hmm.
our own businesses, all of that. And if you can't do that, then find someone who can. And so maybe I don't know someone who could give a referral, but I remember that Bob was mentioning
Hmm.
about that. So let me tell Bob, like, hey, let's talk about that. I think you guys
Sure.
could connect. So there's a lot of opportunity to help other people just by being genuine and checking yourself at the door and making sure that your mindset's right. A lot of times,
Very,
how
very cool.
unfair. Yeah, how
Yeah.
unfair is it if if you or I got on here and we were just having a bad day, and
Right.
it just things wouldn't go right, and of course
Yeah.
technology could throw you for a loop, and then we
Hmm.
just got it, there's no reason, so you could just
Oh,
kind of
yeah.
check that.
No, that's very cool. So, I know you didn't come to like, if I remember correctly, you didn't do like school for marketing and management and
No,
that kind of stuff. Is that right?
no, I totally fell into all of this. And some days I love it and some days I hate it. The
Mhm.
fact that I that I didn't
Sure.
go to school.
Right.
I love that I don't have that debt.
Fair enough.
But it's school is worth it for the right people. I've
Sure.
learned that this industry has changed so much that what I would have learned, many
Hmm.
years ago isn't very applicable now. But
Right.
regardless of whether you're in school or not in school, the one thing that is never going to change is people and the relationships you have with them. And so regardless of the medium that you connect on, whether it's
Mhm.
digital or in person or whatever, you still have to maintain a relationship with people in
Right.
some form or fashion. You still have to communicate in some form or fashion. So that's really the evergreen part of it, that
Hmm.
regardless of what you learn, when you learn, how you learn,
Hmm.
how much you learn, it's the human element. You can't teach that. You can only experience it.
Right. There's also something to be said for talent as well. Somebody who has a natural inclination to doing something. I know, I got my start in branding and marketing, that kind of stuff from
Hmm.
the graphic design aspect. And I
Yeah.
just have a natural aptitude for it. And it would always be funny. People would come in, to where different places that I've worked and whatever else. They'd be like, oh well, I'm a graphic design major, I've got a graphic design degree, blah 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 blah. I'm like, and what are you doing exactly now? you know and it's not to say that they don't necessarily have skills. It's just, sometimes it's about what you can actually do versus what you've been taught, I guess, if that makes sense.
Yeah, having the right vision. I mean, I've seen your work.
Hmm.
It's and I've seen others work who have called themselves graphic designers,
Right.
and so there's the unique aspect of anything involving anything creative
Hmm.
is that it's going to be different person to
Oh, for
person.
sure. Yeah.
And yeah, so for example, like with my current job with Vid Monster Productions, a video company, like sometimes I have clients, they come to us and maybe it's a musician, he wants a music video, or
Hmm.
maybe it's another marketer and she needs an ad.
Sure.
And so looking at the dynamic, the creative that goes into that, I wouldn't have the same guy that, goes and films ads normally do a
Right.
music video. And just to the same effect, I wouldn't have the guy that normally works on music videos
Right.
work work on
Oh, yeah,
a
yeah.
marketing ad. So they have different vibes, they have different, and so sometimes we
Right.
have to learn to work within our skill sets,
Hmm.
especially with graphic design. It's so broad.
It really is.
There's so
Unfortunately.
many, there's so many. How would you describe your style?
Yeah, like a semi-modern classic simplistic corporate style, I guess is
Okay.
more of what I do. You know,
Modern
I
corporate.
well, yeah, I mean, I always talk to people. I have this big thing that I downloaded off the internet. It's this huge image. It's got like the top like 100 logos, for example,
Oh
of
yeah.
the Fortune 500. And the one thing that's always common to 95% of them is simplicity, not a
Hmm.
lot of colors, maybe a little hint of something here and there, a little symbolism, whatever. But but it's never anything that's, people don't realize that, like like the Xerox logo used to be, like at the end it was just an X with pieces of paper floating off the end, and
Oh
nobody
yeah.
ever knew what that was. And it's so for me, I try to just find, whoever I'm working with, try to, we're storytellers at the end of the day.
Hmm.
Anybody that does any brand stuff as opposed to just design stuff. But I
Hmm.
always try to keep things, it's what can I do to get the message across of who somebody is in the simplest medium and simplest way possible, because those are
Hmm.
the things that are going to be remembered also. I mean, if you see a sign on the side of the road that's got 10 paragraphs of tiny
Oh
font and all this
no.
other kind of stuff,
Mm-mm.
and
No.
because, oh, right, exactly, yeah, I mean, there's some
No,
people
thank
just,
you.
oh my gosh, yeah. As opposed to, like, now hiring, for example, like, okay, you got the message across, good job.
Yes. Yes.
There's something to be said for simplicity, and there's a reason why, you know things get done the way they do. It's because they work. you know
Yep.
Sometimes you don't have to break the mold.
Have you heard of 1 minute briefs?
I have not, but it sounds like something I should get involved
Oh,
with.
you would totally love this. I recommend this to any designer, any creative, anyone who appreciates
Hmm.
how a concept is made and comes to life, from the sketch to the actual art
Sure.
getting put out. So yeah, 1 minute briefs, and you can just Google it and it'll come up. But the
Sure.
primary focus is an account on Twitter, and they'll use a certain hashtag to drive a certain topic, like
Hmm.
trampolines.
It's
Trampolines was a recent topic. And so then anyone in the
awesome.
world, they have a certain time period to submit a brief. And it's not really even a brief. Like sometimes it's
Hmm.
just a sketch. And they encourage you to use 5 words or less and have it like visually direct. And
That's
it's
awesome.
just amazing. So you can
Hmm.
take one topic and see so many different creative perspectives.
Right.
It's amazing.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
One thing that, circling back just a touch, one thing that impresses me too is you're just a little bit younger than me. We're not really old. We still qualify in the under 40 category, but we're getting closer. But I find it to be rare, especially in folks, because we're considered like the old millennials. I guess
Yes.
technically, if you really want to. My big sister always is like, "Yeah, you're a millennial. I'm Gen X." And that's, well, there's.
I just had that conversation last night with someone
Oh
about
my
like
gosh.
who is Gen X, who's millennial,
Right,
who's
right,
Gen
right.
Z.
It's
Yes,
just everybody wants to not be a millennial, apparently. But,
there's a
but
stigma.
regardless, it's unusual in my experience to find people our age that either are flexible enough in their beliefs or just wise enough to know that not everything is right for every situation. Like you were talking about, like, you have different chess pieces that, you don't always need all of them on the board at once, or you might need this piece at one time and this piece.
Right.
And it's just, I find that a lot of folks in that kind of, 40 and under category, or maybe even just 30 to 40, but the folks who really are starting businesses and owning businesses, especially, they get their mindset on something and it just becomes a
Hmm.
situation where they just, like you can't reason with them at all, because they,
No,
they
the
don't have
tunnel
the wisdom
vision.
to know. Right. Yeah. It's just, well,
Well, and sometimes you got to let people make mistakes.
mhm.
You have to let them try it, and maybe it doesn't turn out to be a mistake. Maybe it turns out to be the best risk they ever took.
Fair enough.
And not to be all sappy optimism with it, but there are so many times I know with our creative team, when you
Hmm.
have like a dozen creative minds in one room, we argue
Oh,
sometimes over
yeah.
what
Yeah.
would be best. And it's a healthy argument
Oh,
because you're
sure.
trying
Yeah.
to make a plan together and
Hmm.
collaborate. But it's sometimes you just have to be willing to be wrong in order
Hmm.
to see what is possible. You'll never
Sure.
create something new if you're not willing to be wrong. I think that that was said by Sir Ken Robinson. It's one of my favorite
That's awesome.
authors. And actually, I framed that quote and put it next to my desk. There are so many times that, and it's not just the woman in me, trying to tell someone that they're wrong, but I'm one of the older members of our team, and so we have a very young founder of our company, and so
Hmm.
there's a lot of growth and growing that he's going through
Sure.
professionally as well, and he's more willing to take risks, and so there's a lot of wisdom
Right.
that I've already been through, and so I'm trying to convince him which risks to take, and sometimes
Hmm.
it's hard. It's really hard.
Right.
Sometimes it
He's
works out, sometimes it doesn't.
I haven't gotten to meet him in person yet. I think I might have talked to him once or twice. He seems like a really good guy. He really seems to have a good head
He
on his
is.
shoulders.
Yeah, I think you guys talked about
Well, yeah, he needs
it
to
was
come do
the
lightsaber fighting at
lightsaber.
some point. Yeah.
Yeah. Lightsaber fighting would be awesome. He
Well,
would
you
love
need to
that.
come too. I mean, it's the
Yes.
it we always joke with people. It's the only place where you can actually beat up on people with a stick and not get arrested. I mean,
Right.
it's yeah. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, well, I was gonna say you and your boyfriend could come, and we have a family dueling class that
Oh,
is like
fun.
where kids can participate with adults. And
Oh,
the
she'd love
and
that.
oh well, yeah, and we bill it as this is the only time you can legally hit your child. you know, and of course, all in good fun, but
Right.
but you're padded up. I mean, it's not like anybody's gonna get hurt, but it's still, yeah, it's always a good time.
That's fun.
But yeah, but so he definitely seems to be. I think it's good that he's got somebody like you there to be able to kind of. He seems to be
Oh,
open
my boss.
enough, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, to be,
Yeah.
to know that he's got somebody who knows what they're doing. It's uh, I hate to use the old cliche, but are cliches for a reason because most of the time they're right. But it's the woman behind the man type of situation. But
Well, I appreciate
well,
that.
it's got to be
That's
nuts in that creative room too. I mean, it's got to be like herding cats, especially as the one who would be looked to as the reasonable one.
sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's easy and very fluid. I think there's so many good ideas, and that's the problem. And it's just picking one that's the
Right.
hard part, and
That I
trying to
understand.
really, yeah. So, I mean, how lucky are we that we have so many great ideas, and and that some of them seem bad, but they're
Right,
still
right.
good,
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So
My
it's
sister
it's
always
really
joked that I have tons of ideas, but every 1 in 10 is like is a winner. But hey, if you're putting out 100 ideas a day and one in
yes,
10's a winner, you're still hitting better than
yes.
most people.
It's making the effort. It's better
Right,
than
right.
doing nothing.
Very true.
So
So let me see. I'm pulling up we have folks, of course, answer questions for us before we get started, just so we can always have a little bit of a heads up on what are some things we want to talk about. And something struck me on here because, I'm very open about like my autism diagnosis and the things that kind of go into who I am and how I am who I am.
hmm
And, you know, my first episode was part 1 of 3 of my actual story where I dive deep, and I'm very open and upfront with folks about things that I've been through and learning experiences and all this. And so I ask this question, and I'll just share the actual question with folks. But I say, are there any mental or physical health issues that make you different from the average person? And, things like depression, ADHD, autism, obesity, heart disease, celiac, just any of that kind of stuff that would make your life a little different than everybody else's. And your short answer was no, which I think is great. But you're like, but I might have ADHD. And I'm like, that's such an ADHD answer. Like, well, no, of course. Well, maybe.
yeah.
I thought that was great. Isn't that kind of necessary in today's world, though? It's like it's so fast and so high octane that you got to be able to like absorb a lot, or else you're just
I wonder if it's also, the byproduct of everything being so fast and so crazy.
see
Um,
that.
so no, actually, I'm taking the steps. Next week I have my first appointment,
Cool.
and to see a therapist with that. But
Mhm.
I'm very interested in seeing what they have to say as far
Sure.
as,
Yeah.
the correlations with ADHD.
Hmm.
And so what's interesting about ADHD, and I've been doing so much research and looking at it from every different
Right.
angle, and more or less I'm trying to convince myself that I don't, but
Sure.
everything I find says the opposite, that
Right.
I more than likely do. So I don't know if that's just the WebMD effect that
Right.
we all joke about having,
Hmm.
um but no, I'm very interested to kind of dive in and see. But so how ADHD presents itself in females is very different than how it presents
Really?
itself in males. And so yeah, and so this is it for me. That was fascinating,
That
because
is.
what that meant was that there's a huge underdiagnosis for girls, teenage
Hmm.
girls even. And so when we talk about what a child needs, and I say child, even a
Oh,
teenager, I
sure.
mean they're still a
Yeah.
minor.
Yeah.
What a child needs as it grows, and in school, and the different learning styles for those things, a lot of those needs go unmet for
Hmm.
girls because of the undiagnosed ADHD, and
Right.
it looks like the opposite of what you would expect.
Mm.
And you'll see higher cases of depression and anxiety being diagnosed, but then they struggle with the medication for that, because the medication that they need isn't for depression or anxiety, it's
Right.
for ADHD.
ADHD.
They need,
Right.
right. And so then you see a lot of these, stories about how, as these young teenage girls had grown into
Hmm.
young adults, and then
Yeah. Yeah.
as their life evolves, and then their diagnosis evolved, and it turns out they were misdiagnosed all along. And so for me, if you go and you look at what are the symptoms of ADHD in women, and you look through that list, I'm textbook. I have all of them. And
Sure.
like, and it amazes me, because I I look at that list, and um I think about all the times I thought I was crazy. I think about all the times that I went overboard on something, all the
Hmm.
times I reacted a certain way that normally other people wouldn't in a certain
Right.
scenario. I'm like, this is classic. And so, not to, there's so much I'm still learning.
Sure.
There's so much that's just different.
Hmm.
But yeah, and so the neurodiversity, I think, is a whole much larger conversation that needs to be had, not just
Agreed.
for workplace ethics and fairness,
Hmm.
but also like just being able to connect and relate to each other. It goes back to the human element,
Right.
how we interact in family, how we
Hmm.
interact in our friendships and relationships, and our
Right.
coworker relationships, all of it. It's just very different, when you think about how, not just ADHD, but when you think about anxiety or
Sure.
depression,
Right.
and how that presents itself, and how we can help each other function, just by being more aware of neurodiverse differences in each
Sure.
other.
Well,
But
one
yeah.
thing in my experience, because I talk about it in my story in the first the first installment of of the first episode of the podcast. But I didn't know about my autism diagnosis till I was about 30, like
Yeah.
early 30s. I just thought I was just weird. And so one thing that I've noticed though, and I don't mean to sound crazy when I say this, but is there's two distinct schools of thought when you encounter a diagnosis like that, as far as the
Hmm.
person who actually has it. And I would think ADHD and things like that would apply also, where you either see it as an opportunity to kind of like dive in and learn more about
Hmm.
yourself. You use it as a tool to be able
Yeah.
to figure out the best way for you to do things, or you use it as a crutch, where it's just like, oh, well, this is why,
Yeah.
this is why I'm like that. Sorry, deal with it, kind of thing. And I've seen
You're
both
right.
a lot.
You're right.
And more often than not, just because it's the easier path, often it seems that people do, like if they get backed into the corner, be like, oh, well, I have blah blah blah, and like that's their excuse, and it's a free pass, and and goes against some of my other social beliefs, but I kind of feel like, well, no, you don't get a free pass. You just get a free education on how to be
Mm,
better, and for somebody like yourself who is clearly very successful, has done a really good job of living in your own skin, as it were, and just utilizing utilizing whatever quirks and weird things are going on to your advantage. I mean, you're definitely one of the ones who, would use it as an educational tool and it just make you even better than you already are. I mean, that's an impressive thing.
well, yeah, and thank you for that. It's honestly though, I've always been fascinated by what makes people tick, what causes this emotion, what
Hmm.
gets people excited, what is it? And
Right.
so for me, that marketing psychology of things, sales psychology of things, the interpersonal relationships,
Hmm.
that psychology with it. And so to me, it's all psychology.
Right.
Um, and years ago I thought about going to school to become a therapist, and
Hmm.
I kind of opted out of that. Obviously I didn't finish school or do with that, but
Sure.
like I shared before, but still I think that the opportunity for everyone to continue to learn is always there. And so maybe that's learning more about yourself for your own
Right.
needs, or maybe it's to help other people, or
Hmm.
maybe it's to better understand how to communicate, or better understand what's coming next,
Sure.
or there's so many different ways that psychology affects us. Again, going back to the neurodiverse education,
Hmm.
that I think especially in this generation we're seeing a huge sweep of that.
Yeah,
That's exciting,
it is.
because I think a lot of people will feel validated. I
Hmm.
think a lot of people will finally get the answers they've been looking for their whole life.
Right.
um, and that's important. That
You know,
conversation is important.
the only thing that irritates me about where we are with all of that now is like, as a small business owner, and I know you probably know about this, but I've gone and like Google searched, and you'll search for like I'll search for like autism small business grants, and that kind of
Hmm.
stuff, because that's when you start something new, you're always like, yes, what can I do? And because there's all
Yeah,
these resources, there's minority owned resources, there's if and there's of course female owned
all different
businesses, all
kinds.
sorts of different resources.
Yeah.
But anything, if you punch in any kind of, oh, well, entrepreneurs with depression or ADHD or, or whatever it is, it's all about, anything you find is like, oh, okay, well, here's a small business loan program for small businesses that are going to treat uh, autism, treat
Hmm.
ADHD. And it's like, you're missing the point here. Like, people have these strengths and we want to encourage them to play into them, but we can't look at, we have to look at them through a special lens and understand, like, no, this person's not trying to treat something. They have this and they know what it is, and, and they're good at what they do. And it's like, it's just a little irritating that we still, as a society, just from that snapshot at least, like, we still see these things as problems, as difficulties, as opposed to
Hmm.
strengths, or as opposed to unique qualities that can let you do something
Oh yeah.
better.
There's a guy on our team who is, quite honestly, I don't know that he's been formally diagnosed, but from my experience, I believe that he has Asperger's.
Mhm.
And so his mind is very beautiful. There's so many different amazing things that
Right.
he can do, and that he
Hmm.
thinks of, and that I don't know anyone else that has ever thought in that direction. and
Sure.
and so it's learning about that, and how to work with different
Right.
types of perspective with it. That's definitely something that I think a lot of businesses need. And there, you were talking about loans and grants, and
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
so many loans and grants out there, and they are hard to find, and they're so marginalized.
Right.
And that's, to me, an issue. Definitely, I
Hmm.
agree with you. It needs to be more serving in different ways. But
Hmm.
there's a lot of small businesses that are left out. So bringing it back to small business, but
Sure. Yeah.
um, you know, eh, they may not have some of the capacity to offer certain things, but to
Hmm.
be able to to inject some additional components to help
Right.
team members
Hmm.
who need those kind of services,
Sure.
but making it more accessible, making it
Right.
easier to learn about, I definitely
Hmm.
think is needed for sure.
It's just it's funny to me that like the word, because so for autism, Asperger's, that spectrum, it's
Hmm.
considered a cognitive developmental disorder, which
Hmm.
just bugs the crap out of me. Like yeah, it's the only reason it's considered a disorder is because it's not what the bulk of people no, not how they're wired. But again, it's the whole thing of, and with ADHD is the same thing, where your mind works in a really impressive way, and it's able to do different things that like cognitive normal quote unquote people have difficulty with, and would look at like these are impossible things that you probably do without a second thought. And it's unfortunate that we still look at these things as detractors, like these things,
Agreed.
if looked at correctly and if fostered correctly, they are things that are could be valuable to
Yeah.
individuals and society as a whole. And again, the whole concept with the power of weird is like we all have a little bit of weird in us, but who really steers into the skid, who really
Right.
dives into it. And I think that you know as far as what I know of you, of what you do, I mean, you're one of those people that you're like, you know what, like this may be different than how other people do it, but this is me, and hell or high water, you know
Oh yeah.
pay attention or get out of my way.
I'm definitely a fan of just getting stuff done.
Mhm.
And sometimes, you just have to be direct about it. I think
Right.
so many people think that we have to have this long drawn out conversation around things, and we can't just get straight to our needs. And
Sure.
especially in business, we
Hmm.
have to play nice around it, especially
Right.
businesses in the South. I don't know if
Oh
you
yeah.
notice that difference.
Yeah.
Southern business owners are a lot different. I've been
They
all
are.
over this country, and no sales conversation takes longer than with a Southern person, because we got to be nice about it. We got to make sure we check on their mama. We got to do the
Right.
whole
Right.
thing.
Exactly.
And then we get to the ask. And whereas anywhere else, it's a much more direct conversation of, hey, this is what I need, or this is what I have, can we make this
Right.
work? And so, or here's the price point, what do you think? um
Right.
and so Southern business owners don't operate the same.
No, they don't. That's very
No.
true. It's a little yeah, no, it's different. It, you know, yeah, it's very different.
Yeah.
My family's from up north, right?
Uh-huh.
They're from northeastern Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York. And it's just it's so funny. One of the things that I credit some of like the communications training that I do, and some of the ability that I have despite being on the spectrum, because typically folks that are on the spectrum aren't necessarily known for being the best communicators, which we get that for a reason. um, but I grew up in a northern house in the South. Like I was the first one
Yeah.
born in the South in my family, and
Oh
literally by
wow.
like a month, well, they moved when my mom was like 8 months pregnant, and
It's
there's a
Southern by
story.
luck.
Oh yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah.
And so like there's a story about my mom was in Kroger one time, and I guess myself and my big sister were both sick, and so the doctor had called in like antibiotics for both of us, but it was the same
Oh
thing, like
wow.
amoxicillin. And so my mom goes to the pharmacy. She figures both kids are sick, but they're taking the same medicine. I'm just gonna get one of them filled. She writes a check, and then she goes and is grocery shopping, and then she kind of feels bad. She's like, well, they both really should get better, I guess. And she goes back to the pharmacy, writes another check, gets the second prescription. And then she goes up to the front finally when she's got all of her groceries and stuff to pay. And she writes another check, and the system, whatever generic computer system in the late 80s or whatever it was that they had, flagged and said, hey, this person's written 3 checks here today. And my mom could not understand for the life of her what the person behind the register was saying, just period.
Oh
Like she had
no, with the
no clue.
accent.
Yeah, with the accent. And
Oh
it's
goodness.
just oh my gosh, like it was this whole thing. Like my mom thought they were going to call the cops, and the manager had to come out and like speak slowly, and be able to, and it was fine, it was just a little override. They're like, oh, okay, whatever, no big deal. But it was this huge thing just because, I say a lot in my professional world is, we might all speak English, but we definitely don't speak the same language all the time.
Correct.
But yeah, I mean, it's well, not to mention there are idiosyncrasies like, oh, well, isn't that special? And, like the little, the
Bless
sweet
your
stuff.
heart.
Right, exactly.
Bless your heart.
People from other parts of the country don't know what that means, what it really means. But yeah, it's interesting, and it's so weird though to think about, because I always, one of the ways that I learned in the sales process initially when I was in commission sales when I was younger was you do emulate, you mimic body posture, and you mimic facial expressions, and you mimic energy level and volume. Right, exactly.
Yes.
And so, and part of that I did not mean to do, but it just kind of happened naturally, was mimicking speech inflection and patterns and stuff like that too. And it's so weird to, you can go to different places in Tennessee, even where we're at, or you're in Kentucky. I mean, different places in Kentucky as well. And even the regionally different things that people say, it just it makes it difficult sometimes to go in, um they're my sister's boyfriend in high school, her and him went on a trip to see my grandparents, who split their time, half time in Florida and half the time in New York, and who were both from the north initially. And he kept asking for tape. And my grandmother had no idea what he was saying. He's like, I just need some tape. I just need to tape something. But it sounded like type, like TYPE to my grandmother. She's like, you want to type a letter? You need a typewriter? Like the typewriter needs ribbon? What do you want? It's it's just, and it's, most people in other parts of the country think Southerners are dumb because of that. But like, no, that's not it. It's just, they probably,
it's a misnomer.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, there are lots of, trust me, I know some brilliant people that people in other parts of the country could not understand whatsoever, but you should really listen when these people talk.
Yeah, they just sound like Boomhauer off King of the Hill, but they're very brilliant.
Yeah.
So no, I understand. And when I lived in Tennessee for a little bit, there was not much of a difference between Tennessee and Kentucky as far as dialect of the Southern language. So we're kind of, the states are siblings in that way. I think a lot of people would agree. There's so much that's in common. So when you go to one state or the other, there's not much that's different, versus if I were to go to Mississippi or Georgia or somewhere, it definitely feels different. But when I was growing up and kind of even in my young 20s, there were so many people in this area who would say, they didn't say that. They said, you speak so well.
Right.
You don't sound like you're from around here.
Right.
And so I always took this as a compliment. That was great, because I always worked on my speaking skills, and public speaking was a big deal to me. I had to do a lot of that. And then I would go to other states. Like when I was doing Chocolate Blues, I would be out in Colorado, and they would say, your accent is so cute.
Oh, I know. Oh,
and it cracks me up, because I'm like, well, where I'm from,
right, exactly,
that I don't have enough Southern accent.
Right. Yeah, my cousins.
Not even getting the whole full Southern piece of it.
My cousin's the same way. I have two cousins that are about my age that live still in northeastern Ohio, and it's the same. Oh, Danny, your accent is just so cute. I'm like, if you had any idea, like you just have no clue. It's a fish out of water type of thing almost. I mean, it's
interesting.
I mean, I know. Sorry, go ahead.
At the very least, no, we're both so excited about the topic. That's great. Don't make me talk over you. Yes, I'm with you. It's the stigma that Southern people are dumb because of the way we speak, but it's also the other stigma is that we're so nice because of the way we speak. And so a little bit of balance in it. I do appreciate that.
True, that's true. Well, it's again like bless his little heart. Like that doesn't mean what people think it means. you know, you have to be a local to know when somebody's, you know, how they're saying that exactly. It doesn't.
Context is everything.
It
My
really is.
mother, my mother used to say this thing, and I didn't realize that it was like a Southern woman thing until years later. But you know, it's as when you're a teenager, sometimes you just say dumb stuff. It's just part of
Hmm.
it.
Oh yeah.
And so I had many moments like that. And my mom, whenever I would say something a little you know, a little wild or a little dumb or a little clueless, she would look at me and she'd say, "You're so pretty."
Yeah.
And I didn't know that she was telling me that I was dumb
Right.
or that what I said in the moment was dumb. But she'd be like, "You're so pretty." Like almost like, thank God you have that going for you
Right.
because
Yeah,
you was
exactly.
not thinking.
Right. It is. I will say it's there's Southern folks take passive aggressiveness to a whole new level. Like they're
Oh
really
yes.
good at it. And let me say this, as like an autistic person, when you don't
Hmm.
catch most of that stuff, it's like,
Yes.
but
Yep.
at least in the South, you know, most of the time, like it's pretty obvious. You know, it's
Yep.
but like
Well, and that goes back to better education about neurodiversity
right.
through and through.
Oh
Because when
yeah,
you
for
think
sure.
about, you know, the types of developments that are happening
Hmm.
with digital aspects of business, there's so many different types of personalities that are now kind of coming out of the mix.
Right.
I think we're seeing a much broader range of neurodiversity in the workplace, and
Yeah,
so
for sure.
to understand like why doesn't he get this joke, or um,
Right.
why doesn't she take the cue, so different things like that, and just being able to understand and relate to each other on that level, I think it just makes a huge difference.
Yeah, it really
And it
does. I
becomes,
agree.
yeah, and it becomes just being aware and being respectful and understanding, rather than, you know, there were so many times in the past that, you know, people probably made fun of people instead of
Right.
making the effort to
Yeah,
understand.
yeah.
So, and that's sad.
It
That's
is.
that's that's sad.
I lived that experience as the one on the butt end of most of that for at least when I was a kid anyway. I totally get it.
Yeah.
You get as a you build up the or for me anyway, you build up that self-deprecating sense of humor. Like if you can beat them to the punch, then they don't have anywhere to
Yeah,
go with it, kind of thing. But I mean, people shouldn't
I
have to
get
do
it.
that though. I mean,
You're
that should
right.
be yeah.
And I'm sorry you had to go through that. And it's, but the amazing thing is everything that you've done, and the direction that you're going in, and how you still do what you do. And that part is amazing.
I appreciate
I
that.
love that. So,
It's you either get busy living or you get busy dying, right? That's isn't that
yeah.
how that phrase goes?
Yep.
So I've got something that you're going to appreciate. So
Oh,
I've got, even though I only have a couple episodes of my podcast out, I've already got a lot of folks that have received like that questionnaire that I send out, and
mhm.
it's a common thread apparently that there are two questions that are supposed to have opposite answers, but basically end up being the same. And so yours is of course like that too. I asked my friend Greg Bennett, who was my guest on my last podcast. You know, the question is, what is your greatest strength and what is your greatest, you know, what would you consider your greatest weakness to be? And his answer was his, how did he phrase it? He said it was his trust issues were his greatest strength. He said because it
Oh
allows him to
wow.
see things from different angles and be able to approach things, you know, with a healthy air of skepticism to make sure that he's seeing everything the way it is. But he also said his
I
greatest
like
weakness
that.
is trust issues. He's like,
Yeah.
I can't trust anybody, man. Like I'm questioning everything, and
Oh yeah.
which I thought was, you know, he cracks me up anyway. Like I can't stop laughing when I'm talking to him. But the answer was, I thought really, I mean, it was a well thought out, intelligent answer. But for yours, again, you know the same questions. What you consider your greatest strength and what you consider your greatest weakness. You basically gave the same answer. Can you go into that a little bit?
Yes, communication is definitely
Yes.
a strength, and it is definitely a weakness. There are many times that, you know, I'm called to speak to people for different things,
Hmm.
or I have to, you know, speak directly, or I have
Right.
to write a speech for someone, and so, or I have to write a script, and so
Right.
I appreciate, you know, that that's a strength, but then there are the times where it is a little much for people. Maybe I want to talk too much, or because I'm trying to understand it. It
Right.
comes back down to the psychology of something that I want
Hmm.
to talk about it. I want to learn.
Right.
I want to, ask a bunch of questions. And so that could be exhausting for
Oh
some
yeah,
people
I get it.
when it's not time, or maybe they've just
Right.
had too much of it, or and it comes back to just kind of checking in and getting that mindset right, which
Mm.
also means respecting other people's mindsets.
Right.
If they're not in the mood to talk about it, or maybe they have a limited capacity
Right.
for talking about it, you should be aware of that. so
Fair
so
enough.
sometimes I've learned that that I have to ask, like, hey, I
Hmm.
really want to talk about this.
Right.
Are you good to talk about that, or should we plan to talk about it later? And so, for example, with work, I mean, that's an easy one to use as an example.
Right.
With There's always so much to talk about, so many ideas,
Hmm.
so many moving parts,
Right.
and sometimes I have to chase our owner Sam down just to get a few answers on some
Right.
things, and either I can run through it very quickly, like just give me yes no questions,
Right.
answers, and then we're good. And then sometimes he'll come back and ask questions, or I need a more in-depth conversation about
Sure.
something in order, because everything is a chain of events and it comes back around to, we got to talk about this
Mm,
every
yeah.
single time. So it could be
Yeah.
exhausting when you're not
Yeah,
ready
for
for it.
sure. The one of my really close friends who I actually do a lot of work with too. I've even got an office in his like space. I do a lot of business development type stuff for him, and we work
Hmm.
together on a lot of different projects. And it's one of those things where my brain goes a mile a minute, and it's
Hmm.
and he'll be like, okay, let's write it down, and we'll think like we'll talk about this one today. And he'll be like, well, I'm still I got to finish this out here. Like he's very one track. I mean, he's very
Oh
good at
yeah.
what he does, but definitely not like a multitasker like that. Like if his brain has to stop and shift gears, like it
Hmm.
totally throws everything off. So I get it. It's I'm the kid in high school band that in class, the band director at the beginning of the class would put 10 tick marks on the board, and she'd erase one every
Aw.
time. Yeah, she'd erase one every time I asked a question. And,
That's so
I'd be out of questions halfway through and I just keep asking them. But so I'm that guy. I understand. She stopped doing it eventually. She thought it would be a deterrent, but it was not. It was like, how fast can I burn those first 10, and then get into bonus questions. But anyway, I digress.
the lightning round.
Right, exactly. You know what? Sometimes when you're all working towards, a common goal, sometimes you just have to ask the question. But
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
so tell me about Vid Monster too. Like I know a little bit about the company. I mean, obviously I've talked to you about it before, but it seems like you guys are doing a lot of cool stuff, and a lot of people, especially with everybody having apps on their phones that they can pay $1 for, whatever. Everybody fancies themselves content creator and all this other kind of stuff.
Hmm.
But you guys, even in that environment, are thriving. I mean, what goes into that for you guys? What really separates it from, hey, I've got an iPhone to, what you guys do as professionals?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's respect all around for
Sure.
it, from the DIY to the professionally made. There's an opportunity in the content space for all of it.
Hmm.
So, number one, video is the most top performing content out there on any platform, any medium, period. And so, if you're not doing video in some form or fashion,
Hmm.
you're missing out. But Vid Monster Productions is a full service content creation and media company, in terms of we help you create the the media for
Hmm.
video, for animation, photography, graphic design,
Hmm.
that motion
Yeah,
typography,
yeah.
as well as like live broadcasts at events, things like that. So
Right.
uh, we don't implement it for you. We don't build websites. We
Sure.
don't write blogs.
Right.
So there's such a broad word in what content is,
Hmm.
and that's where, and we're in such a great age right now where content is king, for
Right.
what kind of content. And so you have to really define what your audience wants, what works for you, what works for your brand, what works for your audience, and then figure out a plan of action from there. I'm a huge fan of reverse engineering a plan. So being able to say, what is the pinnacle we want to get to? What
Right.
is this part up here? And then breaking it down bite-sized pieces and how to take this journey to the top.
Right.
And so a lot of times I'll meet with clients and of all different shapes and sizes. We work with global clients. And that's always fun. There's some things I can't talk about with it.
Oh,
I
sure.
wish
Right.
so much
Right.
I
Yeah.
could. And sometimes we'll work with other agencies who
Hmm.
outsource that production to us. And sometimes we'll work with other small businesses, or maybe they're like a chain of stuff or a one-man shop.
Sure.
And whether they come to us saying we need a whole year's worth of content created and we don't
Hmm.
know where to start, we can help. Or whether it's, hey, we just need an extra crew member on this shoot,
Sure.
or someone to just edit it after we shoot it. Can you help? Yes.
Hmm.
And then I have other people saying, hey, this is my budget,
Right.
and can we do it? And I'm like, yes, if we film it on your cell phone, we can edit it for you.
Right.
And that's not meant to be a dig. It's
No,
not meant
not
to
at
be
all. Yeah.
insulting. It's we're at, being
Well, it's
able to
problem
be
solving.
amenable.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so getting creative, and there are so many apps out there. The caveat is time.
Hmm.
Do you have enough time?
Right.
And so really that's the precious piece of it all is your
Hmm.
time. And so if you have the time to sit down and learn this skill or this
Right.
software and kind of look into that, that's great. I say more power to you. Let's do that. If you need
Sure.
some
Yeah.
tips, tricks, if you want some advice, call
Hmm.
us. We'll be happy to consult.
Sure.
We're not keeping anyone from DIY.
Right.
We
Right.
want you to do video because
Sure.
the more that you do video and the more success that you see with it,
Right.
the less time you'll have and you'll need to hire someone like
Right.
us.
Fair
So
enough.
that's fine. That's fine. Keep doing video. But the fact is, it works. And
Yeah.
so whether you're on level 1 or level 10 or somewhere in between, being able to help supplement that's
Sure.
huge. During the pandemic, man, we were all a little confused for like a
Hmm.
month or two
Right.
there, and then we all kind of settled into it. I think we can agree. But around that March time frame when the whole country was just gradually shutting
Right.
down across the board, um, I had clients suddenly reaching out saying, we'll have to reschedule the shoot,
Right.
or hey, I know we talked about filming today, but I've got to go home.
Right.
And so for us, like there was a hot second there as a small business, as a
Hmm.
creative small business,
Right.
I was like, oh my gosh, are we going to be needed?
Right.
Is this going to be necessary? What's happening? And so that didn't last long because then the phone wouldn't stop ringing and everybody wanted video. Everybody wanted to do a live stream. Everybody needed help. Everybody needed something. And so it was a really powerful way to reconnect with people
Right.
in terms of giving something as a service,
Hmm.
that they could take advantage of in a more unique way. Where, for
Right.
example, we would go into museums would call us and they wanted like a 360 video for something because they couldn't have people in and touring the
Right.
museum, but
Virtual
you,
tours and right.
they
That's
could do a
awesome.
virtual
Yeah.
tour on their website, and so
That's
we could
great.
absolutely help them with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it became an opportunity for people who were in other parts of the country who may not have, regardless of the pandemic, ever been able to
Right.
travel. They could
Yeah.
still
Yeah.
experience it. And
That's
so
awesome.
what an opportunity that was and there were so many new media grants that were created, which by the way,
Hmm.
for anyone listening, if you have like a facility, like a tourism facility, and you want a 360 tour or some videos on that one, there is a grant out there. And so you go and seek it out. Forgive me in this moment, I cannot remember the name, and that is the worst injustice to
Well, we
sharing
can
this
we can find
information.
it and we'll put the link
Yeah,
down
we'll
in the
find it.
description.
But
Yeah.
and so there's so many great things that are getting awarded to help bring up the media creation for a lot of these tourism sites.
That's
And
awesome.
so so that's really exciting.
Hmm.
So but it's every day is different at Vid Monster. Every day is fun, exciting. My role there is the marketing and sales director,
Hmm.
and so I work directly with the owner and the founder who, when he was 13, created the company
That's
unintentionally.
awesome.
He was, and he's 26 now. He just turned 26. So he's a young business owner. I'm very proud of him. He has done so much, and being able to kind of see that growth over the years has been excellent. But yeah, he just started out exploring, trying to put videos on YouTube
Right.
and just experimenting, and which is, I think, really where a lot of people, they just want to understand, like, what's YouTube and how can I take advantage of it? Well,
Right.
just
Yeah.
start doing something. So yeah, and so that kind
Very
of
cool.
grew when he went to college. He ended up working for PBS during his time as a student,
Heck
and when he
yeah.
graduated, yeah, it was pretty cool.
Yeah.
When he graduated, he decided to launch the business, which was already aptly named Vid Monster,
Right.
which is
That's
what his
good. Yeah.
YouTube channel. Yeah, his YouTube channel was called Vid
Right.
Monster, so it was a natural lead over,
Yeah.
and
That's very cool.
yeah, I met them. Him and another guy had founded the business, and that other guy has since left. But
Hmm.
I met them when they were students and kind of mentored and gave some advice in some ways. Met them
Sure.
at an entrepreneurship class where I spoke to those college students, which I find that ironic. So not having a degree, and I'm
Right.
speaking to college students
Right. Right. Yeah.
about entrepreneurship. So
Hmm.
you just got to go for it. But but yeah, and so that's where I met them. And so with some life changes, and I wanted to kind of plant roots again, and
Right.
back in my hometown, and move back to Bowling Green. And so I did that, sold Chocolate Blues, and was kind of doing a few things and
Yeah.
just trying
Yeah.
to figure out what was next. And the ability, and some things changed in life, and so
Hmm.
the ability to continue to work with small businesses and be creative and have fun with it,
Right.
naturally, that was the direction I wanted to help them run in.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That's
it's
cool.
been it's been fun. It's been a lot of fun. One thing, we're actually having a big event tomorrow. We now have a studio, whereas before we didn't. And it is a modest studio compared to other people in Hollywood, for example. It's
Sure.
not
Yeah.
Hollywood, but it's exceptional. And so we're going to be offering to rent the studio out now to other
Nice.
creatives. And I'm so excited about that because there are such a lack of resources
Right.
like this studio for creative, for freelancers, for
Hmm.
small agencies, for all of that. And
Oh
so
yeah, for sure.
to be able to share that with other creative teams and individuals, that's monumental.
Oh yeah.
And so it's exciting.
It really is. That's good stuff. I mean, people don't necessarily think of Bowling Green. I mean, most people that aren't from Bowling Green know two things. They know I-65 and they know Corvette Museum. But
Yes.
Bowling Green has a lot more going on, and it's a bigger community than most people
Oh yeah.
realize just to see it from the interstate.
Yes.
It's something that I've learned over the years more and more kind of about what's going on up there. And it always takes me by surprise how much of a hub it is for all this cool little
Yes.
indie. It's kind of
Oh
like the
yeah.
Portland of the of this kind of, you know,
Of the South.
yeah, basically, which is, I mean, I kind of think that's neat. I mean, it's, it's very singular, and it makes sense that you guys will be in a place like that.
Yeah.
You're still
Bowling
close to
Green.
everything, but yeah.
Yeah. Bowling Green was listed in the top 10 places to live in the country. And so yeah.
That's
So
awesome. Yeah.
I think it was Forbes that wrote that. Forgive me if that's wrong. But it was a very reputable source
Right.
like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I was born and raised here and came back, and you're right. A lot of people think of Corvette, or maybe they don't know that
Right.
every single Corvette in the world is made here in
Well,
Bowling Green,
right. Yeah.
and that's exciting. Um, you would not believe the amount of giggles we get whenever people get caught racing Corvettes around here, and it's
Oh,
it's
geez.
funny. But yeah, yeah, it's it's an idyllic town. Like you
Hmm.
see these idyllic towns on TV and stuff like that. It's very
Right.
similar here. So it's I'm very fortunate
Sure.
to be here. So it's a great place.
Well, it's big enough that you got stuff to do, but not so big that everybody's just
Yeah.
falling over each other. I mean, it's
Oh
a
yeah.
good size. Yeah.
Well, and then we're still about an hour or so, like a little over an hour north of Nashville,
Right.
and about an hour and a half just under Louisville. So we're right in between Louisville and Nashville. And so we're kind of in that prime spot for a lot of things, which helps, number one, make everything a little bit more affordable because we're
Sure.
not in a metropolitan area.
Right.
And then number two, it's extremely accessible. We're within a day's drive of 75% of the country. And so we can
It's
just
cool.
hop
Yeah.
on the interstate and get
Right.
there. So,
Which for a company that services people all over the place, that's got to be
oh yeah,
helpful too.
yeah,
Yeah.
it is very helpful.
I love the fact that
So
you say Nashville, but Louisville, which
Louisville,
we're talking about language earlier. You know, it's well, but you say Nashville, but it's Louisville, even though it's the same Ville. Just have to point that
yeah.
out because I find that funny.
Oh
But
yes, no, Louisville is its own. It's its own. Yeah,
it's a
that's
cool town.
it.
Yeah.
It's its own culture, and
Yeah,
it has its own language.
it does. That's true. Well, a lot of folks say Nashville. You know, it depends on who you
Oh
talk
yeah,
to, but it's I guess Nashville's got a big enough audience around the world because it's Music City and all that.
very global.
And so it tends to stay Nashville for the most part, unless you're
Yeah.
really local. But it just cracks me up. It's like, man, that's that's the same word. But yeah. Just again, I find that stuff interesting. I can't help it. Uh, uh, so one of the things that you said a couple times, and something that really and it does interest me, it helped me develop my spectrum perspective training program, is my experience in sales and the psychology of sales, and about how you actually interact with people. um t- Tell me a little bit more about like what would you define that as for somebody who's never even thought about that, but also kind of where do you see that as part of what you do, and kind of what makes it so interesting to
Um, so do you mean like in the terms of somebody who has never thought about that, as far as sales being a great job for someone who's weird? Is
you?
that what you
Well,
mean?
I mean, that's a good way to look at it also. I was more of thinking like there are so many people that see like consumers, right? Consumers who
Oh
see
yeah,
salespeople as they're pushy and obnoxious and all this other kind of stuff. It's that old 1970s car dealership vibe,
oh
of
yeah,
pushy and all this other
yeah,
kind of stuff. But I mean, you and I know that that's not necessarily the case. But
yeah.
it's a misconception, obviously, on the part of a lot of consumers that that's still how they see it. Um, but yeah, so kind of from that perspective, what would people be surprised that about that there's some process behind all that, that's not just obnoxious guys trying to hawk bad cars?
Yeah, there's definitely been a stigma around salespeople. And I do think that the weirder you are, the better you'll sell, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do, because number one, you're going to stand out.
True.
And that's a definitive thing that a lot of people don't think about. So at the end of the day, regardless of the type of salesman that you have, people want to buy stuff. And if they buy it from you, great. You just have to help them. And so it really depends on your intention when it comes down to sales, or it does for me at the very least.
Mhm.
Um, I'm not commissioned. I'm not a commissioned salesperson in the role that I'm
Sure.
in. And it's interesting how the tone of a conversation changes when I let a client know that
Oh
I
yeah. Hmm.
yeah, that I don't work on commission. And so many sales positions don't. But being able to say, yes, I can help you with sales. Here are my intentions. This is,
Right.
I want to help you get what you want and what you need, and
Hmm.
help bridge the gap if that needs to be done. And so I have a lot of people sometimes who will just call me and say, I trust your opinion,
Right.
which I appreciate that they
Yeah, for
do.
sure.
And not everybody, is able to give that much trust. But when you
Right.
have a really highly specialized product or
Hmm.
service and people don't really know, I mean,
Right.
what other choice are they left with? They've
Fair
got to
enough.
trust the guy that they're calling.
Right.
So most of the time they call and they'll say, I trust your opinion. Here's what I'm thinking, or this is kind of what I want to get.
Right.
I want a video that is da 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 da, and how much does that cost, or like how
Oh
much is
yeah.
the video?
Right.
And I love that question. How much is
Hmm.
the video? Because everything we do is unique, and
Right.
so what would be a project package for client A is going to be a totally different project package for
Right.
client B. Maybe they don't want some of this sugar and spice in their
Hmm.
recipe, and maybe this person does. And
Right.
maybe this person needs some hot sauce on the recipe. Maybe it's, whether
Right.
we're hiring actors or additional voiceover or script
Sure.
writing, or do we need to rent a location,
I
or
gotcha. Yeah,
do we
that's
need
cool.
to rent additional crew members? Do we
Right.
have to rent special equipment?
Hmm.
Is there a
I
safety
gotcha.
aspect that we,
Right.
so there's so many different things. Um, but being able, I think a lot more people would appreciate the sales process if they if they felt like their salesperson
Right.
really genuinely just wanted to help them. And so at the end of the
Hmm.
day, that comes back to the salesperson
True.
and their intentions and what they communicate. But I know I always share with people, at the end of the day, I don't make commission off this.
Right.
I'm gonna make my dime, whether or not you do this or
Right.
that. But I want to help make sure that you get the product that you need to do the thing that you need.
Right.
And so let's talk about what that looks like. Let's talk about your vision.
Right.
And so sometimes it's not even about like focusing on the sales. It's really
Hmm.
about letting people communicate what their needs are and
Sure.
listening and not talking. And that over communicating part that we were
Right.
joking about earlier,
Hmm.
that's where that can be a detriment
Oh
sometimes.
yeah.
We
Talk
just need to
yourself straight
listen
out of
more.
a. Hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Been there, done that. I know how that
yeah.
works. That's just cool. Yeah. Again, you're a classic example of somebody who definitely does kind of steer into the skid, and just you forged your own path for sure. Again, the term hell or high water comes to mind when I think of you, because it's, I mean, you just don't take no for an answer. I mean, you make your own way, and it's something that, again, something I really admire, something I really appreciate, and something that I know that I'm sure your whole team, at Vid Monster and everybody appreciates too. I mean, you bring a lot of, you know, there's a lot of firepower there. I mean,
Some
when, when
days.
when you prove that you're somebody who can get things done, I mean, it makes all the difference in the world. Um, so
Well,
what? Sorry, go ahead. Yeah, please.
well, I was just gonna say, at the end of the day, just because somebody can get something done doesn't mean that they can always do it by themselves.
Fair
It takes
enough.
it. We have a whole team of people,
Hmm.
just doing it, just doing their talent, doing their dream, doing
Sure.
their vision, and it really it takes us all in order to do that. Even when I owned Chocolate Blues and I was running, like I couldn't have done that without the directors. I couldn't have
Sure.
done that without the sponsors and the
Right.
vendors. Like none of that. At the end of the day, no man is an island,
Fair enough.
and we have to be able to rely on each other in order to make any kind of progress happen. We have to be able to communicate. We have to be able to trust the process,
Hmm.
um, and and say, how can I help, and be ready
Right.
to listen. So that human element is always going to be there.
That's something I respect a lot. That's something I try to do myself. I'm- I used to watch How I Met Your Mother, the TV show. I don't know if you're ever big on
Yeah, it
that.
was a good one.
Well, Barney,
Yes, Neil Patrick Harris.
right, Neil Patrick Harris is crazed sex addict monstrosity of a man. Um, he always, whenever a need would arise, he'd be like, "Oh, I got a guy for that." And I don't remember what exactly the situation was, but there was one time when they were like, "Well, we need a guy," and he's like, "Oh, okay, I'll call Guy." And they're like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, Guy. He's my guy. If I need a guy, he gets him." And ever since I saw that, and that stuck with me, especially as a small business person now, is like I want my network of people to be as deep as humanly possible. That way, if I know that I can't do something, I've got a guy out there who can find a guy. And and I have been fortunate enough to be able to include you in that network of people now for a while. But but yeah, I mean, that speaks to me so much. Like he has a guy named Guy who's his guy who can get a guy,
That's
and it's
hilarious.
yeah. So that's something that again, something I try to emulate, but definitely something I respect when somebody's able to put that together. Because like you said, I mean, you can't do everything yourself. You need you need people, and
Hmm.
you need people who are different than you and have different strengths than you too, to be able to complement and to
Yes,
make things go.
absolutely.
So I have a question. I'm going to ask. I think it's going to be one of those things where I ask it to everybody. My fiance who passed away a few years ago, Jess. One of her favorite things to say was the Gandhi quote of "Be the change you want to see in the world." And I always thought that's a nice sentiment. But my take on that is be the weird you want to see in the world, because I think we need to have more examples of people who are kind of not to borrow the terminology, but out and proud is weird.
Hmm.
Kind of letting folks know like, hey, it's okay. So if there was weird you wanted to see in the world, like what would that be? Like what would you want to see more of?
I like this question. Number
Well, good.
one,
I'm glad.
I don't know. I think more authenticity.
Hmm.
I think so many people walk around afraid to be authentic
Yeah.
because they'll be rejected.
Hmm.
Um, and so with the authenticness also comes, the opposite of that, which is acceptance of that. So I think I would love to see more people be able to be unapologetically authentic and unapologetically accepting. I think that would be lovely.
You can make me cry. That's awesome. That's really good. I'm known as a weeper in some circles, so it's okay. It's not a big deal. I'm not trying to put on the big manly face, but no, that is so. I mean, that's a really true thing. And I do have to say, just from my own experience, it'd be real. There are people in the world who are so jaded and so scarred by life that
Yeah.
they don't realize that some people are just sincerely genuine and authentic and nice. And I know, just like everybody, you've had your own difficulties and things that you struggled with and grown from, and to know that you're out there, and not only do you try to see the authenticity in people and see the sincerity, but you also feel like you want to promote that out in the world, despite anything that may have happened to you before. That's something that just resonates with me, and hopefully anybody that's listening to from now to whenever they want to pull this up, hopefully that's something that resonates with them as well, as just knowing like that's really is the end goal for a lot of people. And we
Hmm.
just want to make that happen more. So very, very cool. Like, thank you for that. That's awesome.
Yeah. Thanks for the question. That was
Yeah.
great.
So if people want to get a hold of you, if they want to find out where they can reach out to you, find out more about what you do professionally, if they want to call you up or hit you up on social media, if they want a video done, any of that kind of fun stuff, how can people find Jennifer?
Well, most people can Google me, and in some ways that's great.
Sure.
Yeah, Jennifer Martin is a broad name, but when you add Chocolate Blues or Vid Monster with it,
Sure.
it tends to go straight to everything you need.
Sure.
Um, I do prefer either email or LinkedIn.
Sure.
I love being able to kind of channel everything in those two directions, because I straight up forget stuff a lot. And if it's not written down,
I get
if
it.
it's not written down,
Right.
I don't know. And so an email is awesome. You can reach me at Jennifer at vidmonsterproductions.com or on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/n/Mrs. Jennifer Martin. And so that's just one of
Nice.
those kind of an old name. And
I like it.
I just couldn't change it, so
Sure.
it'll have to hang around for a hot second.
I
But
get
you
it.
can reach.
Well, we'll also
Yeah,
we'll link to those two things in the description as
thank
well.
you.
So if folks are looking for you,
Yeah.
anybody and anywhere across the country that's looking for video type production stuff, not just because Jen's amazing and you can absolutely trust her with whatever you need done, but they actually really do really impressive work. So definitely take a look at Vid Monster and go and check out what they do. They're all over social media with some of the different projects, and of course their website is cool and looks good and all that kind of stuff. It's one of the only companies that looks good in orange, so I will give you guys that from a brand
Thank you.
perspective.
Yes,
But yeah,
that was
so
that was
again,
a fun one to pick out. Was orange.
oh
Nobody
yeah.
picks orange. Of course,
Well,
I want that one.
only the crackheads. No, I'm kidding. Sorry, I apologize. No, most folks that are crackheads have better brand sense than to pick orange, but that's okay. That Vid Monster folks actually do make it look good. It's a cool logo and everything. That it gets my stamp of A+
Cool.
for being a brand designer, so that's cool too.
Well, keep an eye out. Here in the next month, we're going to be doing some upgrades on some things.
Ah,
So just we'll
upgrades on
keep the
that kind of
orange.
stuff. Okay,
Yeah, keeping the orange, But
And you
just kind
didn't
of
call
overall.
me to help with that kind of stuff. I'm so disappointed. No, I'm kidding. No, yeah, you guys have a big team. That's cool. Well, yeah, I'm looking forward to that. It's gonna be good stuff. Like I said, anybody that's out there that's looking for video, these guys are the folks to go to. And Jen is a great consultant for events and different things like that as well. So if you've got kind of a one-off thing going on and you have no idea how you're going to make it happen, pay her way more money than you think you should, and and because she's worth it, and she will make sure that everything happens the right way for you. Jen, thank you so much for jumping on here again with me. I know I haven't been doing this for very long, but I feel like my quality of guests is just knocking it out of the park, and you are no exception. I really appreciate you making the time.
Thank you for having me on. Thank you for reaching out, arranging that, for thinking that I'm weird enough. So that's exciting. So I
Very
love it.
cool. Well, I appreciate it. It's always good to talk to you, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys have coming up soon.
Thank you for listening to The Power of Weird. This episode of The Power of Weird was brought to you by the Spectrum Perspective, communication training for the modern business. Learn more online at thespectrumperspective.com or simply follow the link in the description below. Make sure to stay tuned for more of my story, as well as great interviews with amazing weird people. And remember, be the weird you want to see in the world. We'll see you next time on The Power of Weird.